Right now, Cuba is sitting in the dark. Streets are empty. And in hospitals, the power that keeps life-saving medical equipment running flickers and dies. The immediate cause of this blackout traces back to neighboring Venezuela. The United States recently tightened sanctions on the Venezuelan government, which suddenly severed Cuba's primary supply of petroleum. To keep the grid from a permanent collapse, Moscow stepped in. A Russian oil tanker packed with fuel is currently approaching the island. This sets up a highly volatile standoff. If the U.S. military enforces its maritime restrictions and intercepts that Russian ship, the situation risks escalating into a major international conflict. This modern struggle over fuel and electricity is the latest chapter in a 60-year timeline. To understand why the lights are going out now, we have to look back at the long-term American effort to isolate the island. The origin of this animosity goes back to 1959, when revolutionary forces overthrew Fulgencio Batista, the authoritarian leader backed by Washington. The new leader, Fidel Castro, immediately moved to eradicate American influence. Overnight, he seized and nationalized U.S.-owned banks, corporate agricultural plots, and massive factories, returning them to the state. The United States retaliated with force. The CIA trained and armed an exile army for an invasion at the Bay of Pigs, but the Cuban military easily defeated them, capturing over 1,000 men. Following the military defeat at the coast, Washington pivoted toward the interior. The CIA launched Operation Mongoose, a covert campaign of terrorism and sabotage inside Cuba. American operatives targeted the backbone of the Cuban economy. They burned crops, bombed transportation bridges, and set fire to sugar mills and power generation plants. When the physical invasion failed, the U.S. adopted a policy of destroying domestic infrastructure and targeting the civilian economy to pressure the government. Facing constant sabotage, Castro needed a powerful ally to survive. He found one in Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. This aerial reconnaissance photograph confirmed a massive Soviet escalation. It shows an MRBM, a medium-range ballistic missile, launch site under construction in San Cristobal, secretly placing nuclear weapons just 90 miles from the American coast. President John F. Kennedy responded by throwing a physical ring of naval ships around the island. This maritime blockade was ordered to trap Cuba and stop any more Soviet weapons from reaching the shore. The tension peaked in the water. U.S. destroyers detected the Soviet submarine B-59 and began dropping depth charges, underwater explosives, to force it to the surface. Deep underwater, the explosions rocked the submarine. The crew had lost radio contact with Moscow. Convinced that World War III had already begun, they armed a 10-kiloton nuclear torpedo and prepared to fire. A launch required unanimous consent from 3 senior officers. 2 agreed, but one officer, Vasily Arkhipov, flatly refused to give his authorization, stopping a global nuclear exchange. After coming within minutes of total annihilation, Kennedy and Khrushchev negotiated a mutual withdrawal of their respective missiles, ending the immediate military standoff. The experience of the missile crisis moved Washington away from direct military confrontation. Instead of risking a nuclear World War III, the U.S. began a long-term campaign to systematically starve the Cuban economy. The U.S. implemented a comprehensive economic embargo, erecting a financial wall around Cuba to isolate it from global trade. Over 6 decades, across 11 U.S. presidencies, the embargo remained. Yet the core objective, toppling the communist government, was never achieved. While the government remained in power, the civilian population absorbed the damage. Denied access to foreign capital and replacement parts, the country's physical infrastructure spent 60 years rotting from the inside out. Decades of restricted trade meant that when the external oil supply finally faltered, there were no backup systems left to catch the fall. The hospitals sit in the dark because the power grid has been running on borrowed time for generations. As that Russian oil tanker pushes toward Havana to turn the lights back on, it proves the Cold War never actually ended. The weapons simply shifted from nuclear missiles to silent economic blockades, leaving millions of civilians caught in the dark.